Welcome back to our channel.
I am Lisa.
And I am Eric. If you want to improve your English, this podcast is perfect for you.
So, let's get started and make English learning easy. What are the words today, Eric?
The first word today is diligent. Then we will continue with humble and to be articulate. Then hit the road. And the final one is bitten by the bug.
Let's start with the first word.
The first word is diligent.
Diligent.
Diligent. Diligent is an adjective that describes someone who works hard and is very careful about doing things well. It means to be hardworking and persistent. For example, Sarah is a diligent student who always completes her homework on time. It means that Sarah is a hardworking student who is careful to finish her homework when it's due.
Here's my example. The diligent gardener spent hours weeding and watering his plants every day. It means that the gardener worked hard and carefully took care of his plants every day, spending a lot of time on it.
We can also use the adverb form diligently to describe how someone does something. For example, he worked diligently on his project.
Good point, Eric. Now, let's listen to a short dialogue using our word diligent.
Emma, I've noticed you've been very diligent in your studies lately.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. I've been trying my best to improve my grades.
Well, your diligent work is paying off. Your test scores have improved a lot.
That's great to hear. I'll continue to be diligent and work hard.
That's the spirit, Emma. Being diligent is a valuable skill that will help you in all areas of life.
That was a great dialogue. The teacher and Emma used our word diligent several times to talk about Emma's hard work.
Yes, they did. Eric, do you think you're a diligent person?
Well, I try to be diligent, especially when I'm working on important projects. How about you, Lisa?
I think I'm diligent in some things, like keeping my house clean, but maybe not so diligent in others, like exercise.
That's interesting. Do you think it's possible to be diligent in everything we do?
That's a good question. I think it would be very hard to be diligent in everything. We need to choose what's most important.
I agree.
When I was learning Spanish, I was very diligent. I studied every day, and it really helped me improve quickly.
That's a great example. Being diligent is really important when learning a new skill. I think some people might be naturally more diligent, but I believe everyone can learn to be more diligent if they try.
I hope our listeners will become more diligent in their English studies after listening to our podcast.
I hope so. It will be really useful for them.
I agree, Eric. Well, that's all we have time for with our word diligent. Let's move on to our next word.
The next word is humble.
Humble.
Humble. Humble is an adjective that describes someone who is not proud or does not think they are better than others.
That's right, Eric. Let's give some example sentences to help our listeners understand better.
Here's my example. Even though he's a famous actor, Tom is very humble and treats everyone with respect. It means that Tom doesn't act like he's more important than others, even though he's well known.
Great example. Here's mine. Sarah was humble about her achievements and didn't like to brag. It means that Sarah didn't talk a lot about her successes or try to make herself look better than others.
Now, let's talk about how to use this word. Humble is usually used before a noun, like a humble person or a humble opinion. And sometimes we use the phrase to be humble about something. For example, he was humble about his success.
Now, let's listen to a short dialogue using the word humble.
Hey, John, did you hear about Mark's promotion?
Yes, I did. He's now the manager of the whole department.
That's amazing. But you know what I like most about Mark?
What's that?
He's so humble. Even with this big promotion, he still treats everyone the same.
I agree. It's nice to see someone be humble about their success.
Definitely. Being humble can make people like you more.
That was a great dialogue, Lisa. I like how it showed the word humble in action.
Me too, Eric. What do you think about being humble?
I think it's a good quality to have. When people are humble, others often like them more.
I agree. I try to be humble too. It's not always easy, but I think it's important. Do you know anyone who is very humble?
Yes, my grandmother is very humble. She has done many great things in her life, but she never talks about them unless someone asks.
That's a great example of being humble. Do you think it's good to be too humble?
That's a good question. I think sometimes people can be too humble and not give themselves enough credit, but it's also important to recognize your own achievements. It's all about finding a balance.
Well said, Eric. I agree with you. I think the balance is very important. Okay, I hope our listeners have learned a lot about the word humble today.
I hope so too, Lisa. Remember, listeners, being humble doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less often.
That's a great way to put it, Eric. Shall we move on to the next word?
Let's do that. The next word is articulate.
Articulate.
Great. So, what does articulate mean? Articulate can be used as an adjective or a verb, but today we'll explain its adjective form. Okay, to be articulate is an adjective that means being able to express your thoughts and ideas clearly and effectively. It can also describe someone who speaks clearly and correctly. For example, she's a very articulate speaker and her presentation was excellent. It means that she's able to express her ideas clearly and effectively, and that's why her presentation was so good.
Great example. Now, it's my turn. Here's another example sentence. He's not very articulate when he's nervous, but he's working on it. It means that when he's nervous, he has trouble expressing his thoughts and ideas clearly, but he's trying to improve.
That's a good example, Lisa, and I think it's worth noting that articulate is sometimes used with the preposition about. For example, she's very articulate about her opinions.
That's a good point, Eric. Now, let's move on to a sample dialogue that uses the word articulate.
Alex, I was impressed with your presentation today. You're very articulate about your research.
Thank you, Professor Johnson. I've been working on being more articulate in expressing my ideas.
It shows you're able to explain complex concepts in an articulate and easy-to-understand way.
I'm glad to hear that. I've been trying to improve my public speaking skills.
Great dialogue. Lisa, what do you think is the most important thing about being articulate?
That's a good question. I think it's being able to express your thoughts and ideas clearly so that others can understand you.
Absolutely, and I think it's also important to be confident when speaking. When you're confident, you're more likely to be articulate.
That's true. And what about in a work setting? How important is it to be articulate in a job interview, for example?
Oh, it's crucial. If you can't express your ideas clearly, you're not going to make a good impression.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you think of a time when you had trouble articulating your thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, actually, I was in a meeting once, and I was trying to explain a complex idea, but I just couldn't get the words out. It was frustrating.
I'm sure it was, but I'm sure you've improved since then.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, Eric, what is the next word?
The next word is hit the road.
Hit the road.
Hit the road.
Hit the road means to start a journey or leave a place. It's an informal way to say you're beginning to travel.
Yes, and it's an idiom used in casual conversation. Let's look at some example sentences.
I'll go first. Here is the first example sentence. We need to hit the road early to avoid traffic. It means that we should leave early in the morning so we don't get stuck in traffic.
Here's my example. After saying goodbye, they hit the road for their trip. It means that after they said goodbye, they started their journey or trip.
Now let's move on to a short dialogue that includes this phrase.
Are you ready to hit the road, Tina?
Yes, I packed everything last night. We can hit the road before it gets too hot.
Good idea. The earlier we leave, the better.
Agreed. I'm excited for our adventure.
Eric, do you like to hit the road for trips?
Yes, I love road trips. It's exciting to see new places. What about you, Lisa?
I enjoy them too. It's nice to explore and have a change of scenery. Do you have any tips for hitting the road?
I always make sure the car is ready and pack some snacks. How about you?
I like to plan the route and make a playlist for the drive. It makes the trip more enjoyable.
Great tips. So we've learned that hit the road means to start traveling. It's a fun way to talk about leaving for a trip.
Yes. And remember, it's a casual phrase you can use with friends and family.
Okay, I think we have reached the end of today's episode.
We hope you learned something new today.
Don't forget to subscribe and like our videos. See you next time.
Bye-bye.